Well, Hank Thomas is here with us, and we were just marveling at technology, really, and that Zoom is actually working.
It is. It certainly is.
Yeah. So you've got a new book out called A Broken Sausage Grinder. Is our government fundamentally flawed? So can you just describe the basic idea of that book, first of all?
Well, it did not start as a book, and that's an important part of the story. One morning, I woke up with the question on my mind of whether or not all this dysfunction that we have going on politically in the country was the result of something that the founding fathers might have overlooked as they were writing the Constitution.
Ooh.
And I thought with these days in the internet that I could just go to the internet, type in a few word searches, and the next thing you know, I would have the answer. Well, it didn't work out that way. It turned out to be a very convoluted trail of links and so forth, and I came to the point where I realized that I had such a stack of notes that I had taken. I was going to have to organize those. And as I was organizing those, I realized I'm writing a book. It was not my plan. I'm an engineer. I never thought of myself much as an author. But I think the book came out pretty well. And in an effort to try to make it something that was a bit unique in the marketplace, I wrote it as if I'm having a conversation with the reader, and I'm hoping that the readers will personalize the book, underline things and dog-ear pages and highlight and write in the margin and all those kinds of things, personalize it. And then when they're in that rather sensitive political conversation with somebody else, perhaps a relative over Thanksgiving dinner or something, when they're having that conversation, they don't have to say, I think this or you said that. They can say, this is what Hank said. What do you think about what Hank said? And they can let me be the focus of the conversation. And I think that'll keep the emotional content of the conversation a little more under control.
Yeah, definitely. And the idea of having a book where you're basically just having a conversation with the reader probably helps you feel like you've got a bit of company when you're reading the book, doesn't it?
Indeed, yes. And we just brought the book out as an audiobook also. And I'm looking forward to in not too long a distant time, getting some feedback on how that works as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So the title of the book, A Broken Sausage Grinder, it's an interesting analogy. How did that come about?
There is said to be, and I won't try to pretend that I've actually seen it, but in the Capitol building in Washington, there is said to be a plaque someplace in there that likens the legislative process to that of a sausage grinder, and something to the effect that good legislation is a bit like making sausage. You like the outcome, but nobody wants to watch it being done.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest things you've learnt along the way when you've written this book?
One of the most interesting outcomes of my research was the number of times that I found myself encountering events in our history that were about things that I never heard in civics class or history classes back in the day when I'm in school. I'm by the way, in my late 70s, a retired guy, so it's been a long time ago. But there are things that I just had never heard in either my history or my civics classes, and here I was confronted with them as significant parts of our American story. And I think that really caught me a bit by surprise. I didn't expect it to be, that I would learn everything in the history class, but I sure didn't think there were so many things that had been left out.
Yeah, that's for sure. So how long did this book actually take you to write then?
Well, I started the research in 2011. It was shortly after the midterm, or in the time frame of the midterm elections within President Obama's first term.
Wow.
They had just completed the Affordable Care Act, and of course that was a very dysfunctional kind of piece of legislation. There was a lot of back and forth between the two sides of the political aisle, and animosities were generated and so forth. that's when the research began, and it just seems like ever since then, the first edition was published in 2012. Then I updated it in a second edition just about 3 years ago, and just brought everything kind of up to date. And where you'd like to say, I've been really feeling good about how things are going with our government and so forth, and it wasn't the case. It just seems like it's been getting worse and worse and worse. Or as I write in the book someplace, everybody says the system is disgusting, and yet somehow the system continues to get more disgusting.
Yeah.
And how does that work exactly?
Yeah. It's been quite the incredible decade then since you first started writing the book, because you've had Obama, then you had Trump, and then you've had almost a year of Biden. And I suppose policy-wise, Obama and Biden are very similar, of course, but Trump is a bit of an odd one out in terms of all presidents, really, isn't he?
Yes, and yet, I think if we had been really honest with ourselves, we would have seen that style of politics coming our way.
Yeah.
It was going to happen eventually, whether it was him or somebody else. But I think there's been a good deal of governmental dissatisfaction for quite a long time. And in fact, I take it all the way back, the real uncivil approach to government. I take that all the way back to the time of President Clinton and Speaker Gingrich. When the two of those were battling back and forth, and things, Speaker Gingrich kind of took us over a threshold with some of the things that were going on then, the contract with America and such. It kind of took us over a threshold, and we realized that somehow the political dialogue could be less civil, and it might even be more fun if it was less civil or something. I don't know. And I think that's kind of where, and then it's just sort of slid downhill from there. And we've gotten to the point where we're really getting pretty far over the edge, I think.
And how have you found Joe Biden's presidency? Because I guess is the country still divided, despite there being a president that I suppose is less divisive than Trump?
Well, in his own way, he is still quite divisive anyway.
Yeah.
He's trying to do some things with the current big infrastructure bill, the $3.5 trillion one. Who ever heard of a $3.5 trillion anything coming out of an? I mean, we can't even think with that many zeros in front of the decimal place. and here we are having that conversation as if we know what we're talking about, and of course we don't. I mean, we only have an idea. I think President Biden has been in some ways refreshing as a new president, but he's also brought along with him some controversy that has inflamed the base on the right side of the aisle. And we're just going to have to kind of keep an eye. He's less chaotic than President Trump was, I think. President Trump liked to keep all the balls in the air. And President Biden would like to see them all lined up on the windowsill.
Yeah. So who would you say have been some authors that have inspired you over the years?
I think the greatest inspiration for me and my approach to this whole business of writing a book and so forth, the greatest inspiration was my mother. She spotted something in me when I was still just very, very young. And she spent a lot of time with me teaching me how to find things out. I was a youngster that always was asking why. I always had a question, and sometimes I'm sure my questions were not that well received. But anyway, she taught me just how to look things up and learn from what I found and so forth. And so she was very supportive in trying to help me find the answers to questions and so forth. And I think she's the one that's probably the most responsible for how this all turned out.
Yeah, definitely. And what would you say are some of the biggest factors as well that have made you successful? Is it also your mum, or are there other things that happened?
I would turn that one a little bit and look to my professional career. I am an engineer.
Oh.
I did 20 years in the military, and I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. I have a master's degree in system engineering. And as I'm sure everybody who has ever seen somebody with a plastic pocket protector with their pens in it knows that engineers just sort of approach things differently.
Yeah.
And we're much more concerned about not just the thing that we're talking about, but what are the potential unintended consequences of the work that we're doing. And so I think that engineers, at least I know I do, tend to look at things in a more complete way. I'm not satisfied to just see the part that might be what I'm looking for. I need to know a little bit more about what's behind it.
Yeah.
And it is in that completeness that I think I'm able to tell a story that's a little bit more complete and a little bit more captivating.
Yeah. So being an engineer then, would you be able to fix a broken sausage grinder?
Yes, I think I could. I'm not sure everybody would like my fix, but I do think I could. If we reverse ourselves back to the beginning and the writing of the Constitution, 55 of our delegates came together from the various states, and it took them 89 days to write the Constitution.
Wow.
Now, I challenge anybody to pick any 55 of our current elected officials, put them in a big room for 89 days, and come up with anything that's even remotely close to our Constitution.
Yeah.
They would be hard pressed to get past the first sentence. I'm sure they would be fighting over the period at the end, whether that should be a period there or a comma or a semicolon or what. They would be arguing about it. The thing that I think we need to do is remember that all of those elected officials, and this is particularly true about our senators and our representatives, they are supposed to be representing us.
Yeah.
Our representatives in the House represent a congressional district. My congressional district has roughly 250,000 people, voters in it. 250,000. The original representatives only represented on the order of 30,000 people. Of course, they didn't have the internet and phones and that sort of thing. So it was a very different situation. Now, I bring all this to the fore because we all will agree that money is somehow at the very root of the problems that we face politically.
Yeah.
And it just rolls off of our tongue that we think about it as special interests and corporations and that sort of thing. But what nobody seems to be able to grasp right away is the two, I think, probably biggest corporations, special interest corporations that are involved in our political system is the RNC and the DNC.
Yeah.
The two political parties. If we would get from our elected representatives, if they would come to work first as Americans and second as Republicans or Democrats, we would have a very different system than we have today.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are each bringing their own spin on how things are supposed to be. It's conservative, it's progressive, whatever it is. And they both bring that spin and they refuse to budge. And that's been the thing that I think that President Trump has been perhaps the most influential in bringing about the attitude that you just simply hold your ground. You don't compromise on anything. Well, of course, if you don't have compromise, you don't have democracy.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the political parties and the founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton wrote about it in I think it was Federalist number 9. He told us about a firm union being of the utmost importance. I'm not getting the phrasing quite right. Of the utmost importance at combating insurrection or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And he was talking about factions, and what are factions if not groups? And groups are political parties.
Yeah. So how does this book compare to other books that are of a similar type? Because I guess there's been lots of books about American politics over the years.
Oh my goodness, yes. I suspect we could probably spend days in a sizable library just looking at political books. I think without, I wouldn't by any stretch begin to say that I've read lots or a majority or anything like that of other authors' work in the world of politics. But I would suspect that one of the things that we would find different between my book and other books is that conversational approach to the writing. I don't get a lot of that. And of course, everything that is contained in the book would fall into the world of political science and history and civics and that sort of thing. And at least in my learning times back in the day, we spent a lot of time memorizing names and dates and places, but we didn't have any context for them. So it was just data points. Memorize this, memorize that. Well, that made the teacher's problem of grading papers a lot easier because you either got it right or you got it wrong. But I think in the book, as I write it, with this conversational approach, those are merely parts of a story, and they just sort of flow into the story. And you may come away from the story that I write, you'll remember the story, but you may not remember those dates as precisely as you would have expected, or even if you might have thought you should have. But in fact, they are all parts of a bigger story that continues on to this day.
Yeah, definitely. So the book is called A Broken Sausage Grinder, Is Our Government Fundamentally Flawed? And where are all the places that we're able to find it?
We can find it most easily on Amazon. We can get it there in either paperback or the audiobook. We didn't bring out a hard copy in the second edition like we did in the first edition. So we find it there. We can find it at Barnes & Noble. The audiobook can be obtained through the Apple store as well, and Audible, which is related to Amazon. Pretty much any bookstore could order it, no problem there. They wouldn't be expected probably to have it on the shelf if you walked through the door, but they could get it in relatively short order, I would think. I also have a website that I have been keeping up. It can be reached in a couple of ways. One is hankthomasblog.com, and the other one is abrokensausagegrinder.com. And either of them will take you to a blog site where I write about these various things that are happening politically pretty much in real time. And people have, I've gotten a lot of comments of acceptance there. So I feel like I'm doing something that a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks very much for dropping by to our little show. It's been great having you here this afternoon.
I appreciate the opportunity very much.